One key thing that underpins any effective devolved governance system is the identification of physical communities with a strong sense of identity. Communities are a product of their distinct geography, historical, and social characteristics. Those factors that create our sense of belonging to the place where we all live. Far too often, I think, modern community boundaries are drawn to achieve equity and administrative convenience, and I strongly believe that this invariably fails. So I think that communities are based on several factors. Let's just see if I can quickly get to the right slide. Oops, DZ, I'm all over the place. Hang on a second. Right. So, geography. I mean, ancient boundaries were based on geology, on geography, prominent hilltops, river crossings, grazing and hunting land, sources of minerals, and around sheltered coastal inlets. And then we had trade between those places, and routes between them were established. Quite a lot of those ancient rights of way are still with us in the countryside. Populations grew and society became more organized. Civil and legal administrative boundaries began to appear, tribal, feudal, and ecclesiastical at first. And then later came the parishes and the counties that we know in the UK today. And social connections form around these places. So through places of worship, through places of work, through education, trade, through healthcare provision. And these all shape our sense of belonging to a place. And the factors that shape our sense of belonging are very rarely convenient for administrators. The closer a person lives to the heart of a community area, the stronger their sense of attachment. At the margins, boundaries often overlap. And it is important that area governance recognises and accommodates this. Communities vary in size. It is critical that community areas are not based on an equitable, convenient distribution of population. That never works. In defining community areas in Wiltshire, this presented us with real challenges. There's a marked variation in the size of our community areas. Nevertheless, it was clear from our consultation that community identity must always trump size and administrative convenience. And the final thing I think to remember about devolution is that it seeks to put local people at the heart of decision making. And that must start with their involvement in the agreement of their own community boundaries. I mean, opposing arrangements against the wishes of local people undermines that principle from the very outset. To identify community areas in Wiltshire, we analysed geographic, historical and social data, and we mapped these boundaries in layers. And this began to show us where natural communities were, which we then took out to extensive consultation before we'd finalised the boundaries. And it was clear that we needed to be very pragmatic about all that, and to allow those settlements on the periphery of the areas to choose which area board they felt was most relevant to them. In some cases, they wanted to attend two area boards where there were issues across boundaries which affected them, and that was absolutely fine, and we realised that was essential. So finally, we had established our community areas, and then we needed to align our civic administration around them. And the council and its partners, including the police and the NHS, set up new teams to reflect the new community boundaries. Service delivery and performance data is now collected on that basis. And that helps to generate the data that informs our community conferences that we've already seen. And it also helps to coordinate resources and focus activities, creating a multi-agency community team approach that provides the infrastructure for community-led devolved governance and empowerment. I spoke earlier about the extensive efforts we made to reimagine public meetings, and to an extent, this worked incredibly well, and attendances were tenfold that of the old traditional committee meetings. And there were many, many new faces in the audience, people we had never seen at civic engagement events before. However, it was obvious from the very start that certain sections of the community were absent. And the challenge we faced was to find a way of bringing these marginalised groups into the civic sphere and to give them a voice in the policy process. There are many reasons why people do not engage or cannot engage, but there is no reason why they should be excluded on that basis. And it was clear that we needed to reach out beyond the meetings and conferences and initiate direct dialogues with those who could not or did not want to participate in that way. And this became something that we called the Wiltshire Voices Project. And again, in developing that approach, we dipped back into academia. And this time it was my reading of the American philosopher Richard Rorty that provided a bit of the inspiration to the team. I mean, towards the end of his life, Rorty reflected on a lifetime of academics' work. And his conclusion was simple. And he said that it was through sentiment and sympathy, not through rationality and universalistic moral discourse, that democratic advances take place. You can see why I was never an academic. And our challenge was to develop a way of generating empathy, understanding, and a more immediate sense of identification with other people. And the methodology was set out to be fully inclusive by design. We recruited project champions from each of the 12 target groups that we were working with to help us make links and connections to gain access to the people we wanted to talk to. With the support and guidance of the project champions, we were able to design engagement processes specifically for each target group. For example, we had barbecues with the gypsy and travelling community. We had cookery classes for the army wives. We had folk music nights for the liveaboard boaters on our canals. We had arts workshops for those with learning disabilities, walks for those with early onset dementia, and many others. And all of the projects included an element of desktop research. We familiarised ourselves with the context and the background to the issues from existing studies and research. But having made the connections with the target groups, we were able to talk directly to members of the groups, recording and transcribing their stories verbatim. And by comparing notes from many similar conversations within that group, we could identify common themes and shared issues. And then the next step in the process was turning those shared issues into questions, and that we could then use to make filmed interviews with the participants. And the films were made by a BAFTA award-winning TV company called True Vision, with the highest production values that we could afford. And filming took place in everyday situations, at home, shopping, on buses, and at various locations within the local community. And each of the films featured only the voices of the people themselves. There were no other participants, and the views expressed were not challenged or mediated in any way. The participants had the final say on the editing process at a specially convened screening workshop where they agreed any changes. And each film was launched and the participants were celebrated and thanked. But the launch events also brought together members of the wider community and civic leaders and officials to listen to the voices and take part in a workshop with the people involved to discuss what initiatives and activities and projects might be needed to address some of the concerns that had been raised. And the films were also played at our area board meetings and actions incorporated into their local priority plans. So let's just see a short clip of one of our Wiltshire Voices films.
you're either an army wife or you're not. You either can do it or you can't. And there are times where you think you can and you can't, or there's times that you think you can't and you can. But the first couple of years really makes you aware of whether you can do it or not. And unfortunately for the people that can't, it usually ends marriages. So it doesn't matter how much you love somebody, if you can't be away from your family and you can't do it on your own, you're not going to last. And I think that, you either return home to your family and leave your husband, or keep your husband and move away from your family.
Behind your back, you don't really know what anybody says to you, do you? You know. I mean, I've talked to people in the pub and they've been nice to me, and when they found out where I come from and who I am, I had one fella that said to another fella, have you actually been on that site where he's come from? And the fella said, yeah, because he did. He used to come down and see me. He was puffing and blowing like as much as say like I wouldn't go down there. Why? You know, we're human beings like anybody else. We don't like to murder anybody, kill anybody. But if one's bad, we're all bad. That's how the tire on here.
You know, I'm aware of this, that this year, I've lost quite a lot of my words, my sort of, but I think the secret is probably to keep talking. This is glorious, isn't it? Oh, I was just feeling like you could sort of, the wind was blowing and you feel like, just take off, I think it's quite nice that the walking we do quite often, that we end up, helping each other. That's good. If we know that someone is further on than we are, then we can just help by holding people and holding onto their arms. Empathy, just having understanding. Well done, everybody. And of course, Millie. I think having a little dog, I'd recommend that to anyone.
I wouldn't mind being a gardener myself. Can mow the grass, cut trees. Since I like nature so much, start going outside more often in the spring and summer and doing jobs like collecting litter. Because outside can be, when you go to McDonald's or wherever, it's just so untidy. So someone's got to do the mess. So that'll be something one day I'd like to do.